the same Bernie Sanders supporters she's now trying to win over. But first, senior national correspondent John Roberts is with the Trump team in Colorado, where the Republican nominee is campaigning today and continues to face questions about his taxes. Good evening, John.
Good evening to you, Brett. Donald Trump on a swing of 3 western states trying to recover from what, for all intents and purposes, was a pretty rough week last week. Today in Pueblo, Colorado, making absolutely no apology for taking full advantage of the tax code as a businessman.
It's my job to minimize the overall tax burden to the greatest extent possible, which allows me to reinvest in neighborhoods, in workers, and build amazing properties, which fuel tremendous growth in their communities.
The Trump campaign is working hard to escape the controversy surrounding the 1995.
Trump was taking from America with both hands and leaving the rest of us with the bill.
At issue is a $916 million net operating loss Trump claimed in 1995 as a result of business failures. Under IRS rules, he could apply that loss against a combined 18 years of income, dramatically reducing his tax liability. The Clinton campaign insists Trump is gaming the system, but what he did appears perfectly legal.
The net operating loss provision exists as an ordinary part of the tax code to smooth out income over time for companies. You can imagine a startup company, for example, that for the first 5 years of their existence, they lose a lot of money, and then in the 6th year they earn profits. But you still want a tax code that accounts for those losses in the first years of their existence.
Trump has tried to turn the tables on Clinton today, hitting her on how she and Bill Clinton made their money after leaving the White House.
Her only method of making money is by selling government favors and granting access to special interests, know nothing about how businesses succeed and grow. Hillary Clinton has never created a single job in her entire life.
But at the same time, he found himself on defense over his Trump Foundation. New York's Democratic Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, a Clinton supporter, ordered the foundation to stop fundraising because it lacked the requisite certification to solicit money from the public. In a statement, Trump spokeswoman Hope Hicks said, "While we remain very concerned about the political motives behind AG Schneiderman's investigation, the Trump Foundation nevertheless intends to cooperate fully with the investigation." Earlier in the day, Trump tried to take advantage of the 14-point lead he enjoys over Hillary Clinton among veterans in a new Fox News poll, speaking to a veterans group in Virginia. But he ran into a storm of controversy when asked how, as president, he would address the issue of PTSD.
When people come back from war and combat and they see things that maybe a lot of the folks in this room have seen many times over, and you're strong and you can handle it, but a lot of people can't handle it.
Trump was ripped in both the media and on Twitter for appearing to suggest that strong people don't suffer PTSD. The Marine Staff Sergeant who asked him the question, Chad Robichaux, responded to that criticism late this afternoon saying, quote, "It's sickening to me that anyone would twist Mr. Trump's words to me, comments to me rather, in order to satisfy a political agenda." Brett?
John Roberts with the Trump campaign in Colorado. John, thank you. The Clinton campaign is once again trying to get past the nominee's disparaging comments about supporters of other candidates. This comes as the Democrat works to fight off Donald Trump in a key Midwestern state. Senior political correspondent Mike Emanuel is in Akron, Ohio tonight. Good evening, Mike.
Brett, good evening. Hillary Clinton is in Ohio tonight trying to make the case she has a better vision for our economy, and she's hoping the endorsement of a sports legend here will help.
Because I know it's for sure. I hope to be elected president, but I know here in Ohio, LeBron will always be the king.
Hillary Clinton returned to battleground Ohio today after receiving the endorsement of NBA superstar LeBron James last night. James plays for the NBA champion Cleveland Cavaliers and is extremely popular here. He was born and raised in Akron. Yet she's still dealing with the fallout of audio of her knocking Bernie Sanders supporters during the primary.
Some are new to politics completely. They're children of the Great Recession, and they are living in their parents' basement.
In that leaked audio where Clinton is explaining to her donors the Bernie Sanders phenomenon, Clinton said she didn't want to throw a wet blanket on their idealism.
You want people to be idealistic. You want them to set big goals. Those of us who understand this, who've been experienced, who have worked in it, know that it's a false promise.
Look, of course it does, but we're in the middle of a campaign, and trust me, if you go to some of the statements that I made about Hillary Clinton, you can see real differences.
The Real Clear Politics average of recent Ohio polls reveals a close race with Trump leading Clinton by 3.4. 45.4 to 42. Despite the fact Clinton and her husband have collected millions in paid speeches from Wall Street, she tried to convince Main Street, if elected, she'll fight the big banks.
One of the nation's biggest banks bullying thousands of employees into committing fraud against unsuspecting customers. We are not going to let corporations like Wells Fargo use these fine print gotchas to escape accountability.
Clinton is also trying to convince Ohio voters she's opposed to and will continue to oppose the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which has become wildly unpopular with workers here and across the Rust Belt. Brett?
Mike Emanuel traveling with the Clinton campaign in Akron, Ohio. Mike, thank you. There is new evidence tonight that the FBI and Justice Department agreed to destroy the computers belonging to senior Clinton aides in exchange for their cooperation in the now closed criminal investigation. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge with the latest on that. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Brett. Writing to the Attorney General Loretta Lynch, the Republican chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, said the 5 immunity deals include 2 side agreements with Clinton attorneys Cheryl Mills and Heather Samuelson, who oversaw the sorting and destruction of 30,000 Clinton emails deemed personal. Under the Justice Department deal, the FBI got access to their computers, and in return, they were shielded from prosecution for obstructing justice, and the FBI agreed to destroy the laptops after concluding its search. Committee Chairman Bob Goodlatte told Fox News, quote, "These side agreements with Mills and Samuelson, coupled with the many unusual aspects of the FBI's investigation, cast serious doubts about whether the decision to not prosecute Hillary Clinton was made impartially or was predetermined by the Justice Department." Last week, FBI Director Comey was pressed on why investigators relied on these agreements to seize evidence rather than the routine method of impaneling a grand jury.
In my experience, you can often do things faster with informal agreements, especially when you're interacting with lawyers. In this particular investigation, the investigative team really wanted to get access to the laptops that were used to sort these emails.
At today's briefing, Fox News asked if the State Department condoned the destruction of the laptops, given the ongoing Freedom of Information Act lawsuits for Clinton's emails.
I can't speak to immunity agreements, and I certainly can't speak to the FBI's investigation. As we've said before, our focus is on processing for public release the materials we have received from the FBI.
A Justice Department spokesman said officials are reviewing the letter. The department has 7 days to respond, Brett.
Catherine, we've been hearing a lot about this WikiLeaks announcement that they're going to come out with some blockbuster that's going to change this race, but it's been changed now to a video release tomorrow?
Well, that's right. The head of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, canceled a dramatic announcement from the balcony of the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he's been living for the past 5 years, to avoid extradition to Sweden, where he faces sex charges. In a tweet posted today, WikiLeaks said the presentation was moved to Berlin and will now be a live video link after developing specific information about Assange's safety. A former senior U.S. cybersecurity official said the decision may be calculated.
Could it be because he wants more attention tomorrow with the big WikiLeaks anniversary? Or could it be that his primary source of material has told him they would prefer to wait?
WikiLeaks is billing the announcement as the past, present, and future of the group on its 10th year anniversary and not an October surprise, Brett.
And of course, we will have all the details of that. Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
Colombia's president and its leftist rebels are vowing to push ahead with the peace process following the shocking defeat of a referendum affirming their agreement to end years of fighting. The measure lost despite pre-election polls predicting a 2-to-1 landslide win. Both sides are now trying to avoid the resumption of a war that has already killed some 220,000 people and displaced 8 million in Colombia. ISIS terrorists are claiming responsibility for a series of attacks in Baghdad that left at least 16 people dead today. They happened in Shiite majority neighborhoods in the Iraqi capital. Terrorist strikes have claimed more than 1,000 lives in Iraq just in the past month. The U.S. Navy has sent 3 warships to the southern coast of Yemen in what officials tell Fox News is a show of force. The United Arab Emirates vessel was hit by 4 rockets Saturday and nearly sunk. The Iran-backed Houthi terror group is claiming responsibility for that rocket attack. One official tells Fox the U.S. Navy is there to ensure shipping continues unimpeded in that area. Another huge setback tonight for President Obama's Syria policy. The U.S. has broken off talks with Russia after being unable to convince Moscow to stop bombing civilians in the key city of Aleppo. Correspondent Kevin Cork has that story tonight from the White House.
Collapsed. That's what happened today to U.S.-Russia talks aimed at ending the violence in Syria.
What's clear is that there was nothing more for the United States and Russia to talk about with regard to trying to reach an agreement that would reduce the violence inside of Syria. And that's tragic.
Tragic and a strategic failure for President Obama, who told New York Magazine that he steadfastly has sought Russian cooperation to end the 5.5-year-old civil war in Syria to no avail, and comes as Russian President Vladimir Putin announced the suspension of a treaty with Washington on cleaning up weapons-grade plutonium, a move that makes clear Putin is willing to use nuclear disarmament as a new bargaining chip in his disputes over Ukraine and Syria.
This was a reasonable, thought-through strategy for applying pressure to the Assad regime in pursuit of the aims that we were seeking to achieve. We're going to have to pursue an alternative approach.
Russia's alleged use of bunker-busting bombs, like the ones that leveled a hospital yesterday in Aleppo, offers inescapable clarity that the Kremlin is unfazed by Washington's complaints and sanctions. The country's foreign ministry spokeswoman even suggested that any U.S. attacks on Russian-backed Syrian forces, quote, will lead to terrible tectonic consequences, not only on the territory of this country, but also in the region on the whole. Experts think the Russians make such provocative statements because they believe President Obama either can't or won't do anything to stop them.
Putin is psychologically in the head of the president, and he has convinced him that any escalation by the president, other than rhetoric, will lead to adverse consequences, when the truth is, most of the time, Putin is bluffing.
Also tonight, Brett, we learned that the Russians have deployed the SA-23 anti-aircraft, anti-missile system in Syria, and that's noteworthy because it's the first time they've deployed that type of system outside of their own country, Brett.
Kevin, that interview the president gave to New York Magazine, President Obama admitting that his signature health care law has, quote, real problems. You know, we've covered a lot of them, but what else did he say there, Kevin?
Well, listen, he said a couple things that I think will probably strike you as obvious, which is, yes, there's gridlock here in Washington. Political polarization is one of the main reasons he says there's a problem with Obamacare. But he goes on to not really point out the fact that there's some staggering numbers here, Brett. Let me just give you a few. There are 4 states now that have single insurance exchanges. 4. Alabama, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Wyoming, just 1 each. And I should tell you that in the state of Minnesota, rates for some folks could rise by as much as 67% next year. That's staggering, to say the least. All this, of course, 28 days ahead of the open enrollment period, which begins just before the election, Brett.
Kevin Cork, live on the North Lawn. Kevin, thank you. Let's get some insight now from syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. He's in Washington tonight. Charles, I want to start with the Syria situation. Now that this diplomacy has essentially crumbled with Moscow, and now they have very sophisticated anti-aircraft weapons going into Syria, it seems like this is an escalation of what was a very bad situation already.
It's an escalation because the Russians are utterly determined to achieve their strategic objectives, and Obama has no strategic objectives. We heard the State Department say, we have tried this reasonable approach. Yeah, they applied a reasonable approach with an adversary in Putin, whose assumptions about this war are totally different. Obama believes that you don't solve problems like these through force. They can't be. There's no military solution. It has to be done by diplomacy. That would be great if the other side had the same thought. Unfortunately, Putin assumes, and is correct in assuming, that some civil wars have a military outcome. Spanish Civil War in the 30s had a military outcome. The American Civil War had a military outcome. And this idea that you solve it by diplomacy and withhold any application of pressure is simply a fantasy. 5 years ago, when the Civil War began, we had the advantage. We were in control of the region. We could have put the Syrian Air Force out of business by destroying the airplanes and hitting the airfields. That's all we had to do. No war, no invasion. The Russians weren't there. We did nothing. Now we have no assets. The Russians have all the assets. That's why we walked away, because the diplomatic approach has been totally shown to be bankrupt.
You know, it's an interesting dichotomy here, because as the president is talking about how there really aren't solutions, he says, militarily in Syria, he's stepping up bombing in Libya. He is increasing the troop numbers and likely an operation to take down Mosul in Iraq very soon with the Iraqis. So on one side, he's stepping up his presence. On the other side, he's saying it's not possible in Syria.
I think in most of these instances, he's trying to prevent a calamity like the fall of Saigon on his watch. So he doesn't want to see it happen in Libya. He doesn't want to see our side lose in Yemen. But these are stopgap measures. There was an escalation in Yemen. As you said, the sinking of a ship from anti-ship missiles from the rebels, that's a huge escalation. There's escalation everywhere because they understand Obama is so risk-averse, nothing will be done between now and the end of his presidency. So if you're the aggressor, as the Russian, the Iranians, Hezbollah, and the Syrian government is in Syria, you move, you strike now. Their strategy in Aleppo is to kill everyone. It's to kill everyone in the civilian rebel areas, hit the hospitals, hit the water pumping stations, hit everything. They know Obama will not lift a finger, and they have no idea what the next administration will do. So why not?
We may hear more about that tomorrow night in this debate. Likely a little bit more policy, possibly. Charles, as always, thank you.
My pleasure.
Up next, why Donald Trump's candidacy has illegal immigrants scrambling to get into the U.S. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 32 in Chicago, as the Illinois treasurer says the state will suspend billions of dollars of investment activity with Wells Fargo. The bank is dealing with a scandal over millions of unauthorized accounts. The San Francisco-based firm has already been fined nearly $200 million. And this is a live look at Orlando from our affiliate, Fox 35. The big story there tonight, preparations for powerful Hurricane Matthew. The Category 4 storm is carrying sustained winds of 130 miles per hour. That makes it one of the most powerful Atlantic hurricanes in recent history. Hundreds of spouses and family members of U.S. military personnel at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, have been relocated to Florida as of this hour. But detainees and those assigned to guard them down at Gitmo, well, they're buckling down and staying put. That is tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We are outside the Beltway as well. And as we head to break, a little bit extra about the university hosting Tuesday's debate. Longwood University was founded in 1839 as an all-girls school before going fully co-ed in 1976. Today, 5,000 students attend this university that was chosen out of about 100 places to host the 2016 vice presidential debate. This week, about 1,000 volunteers are assisting guests and the media to make sure everything goes smoothly for Tuesday's one and only debate between Governor Mike Pence and Senator Tim Kaine. Some of them are helping us here on set, so thanks to them. Special Report continues after a quick break. Gorgeous southern campus here in Virginia. This is the first Monday in October. It's the start of the U.S. Supreme Court term and the day we find out what the court will be doing in coming months. Justices will not hear an appeal from the NFL's Washington Redskins over the government's decision to cancel its trademarks at the urging of some Native Americans. But a separate case involving an Asian American rock band called the Slants is challenging whether trademark law violates the First Amendment. That will impact the Redskins case. The court has denied an Obama administration request to break its recent tie over the president's plan to protect millions of immigrants once a ninth justice is confirmed. They split 4-4 in June, effectively killing the White House plan to shield the immigrants from deportation. The court has been shorthanded, of course, since the death of Justice Antonin Scalia in February, and the president's nominee for the Supreme Court, Merrick Garland, has so far been denied a Senate hearing. Customs and Border officials report a 97% increase in the apprehension of family units at the U.S.-Mexico border in the first 11 months of this fiscal year. Correspondent Casey Stiegel tells us about one big reason so many people are making a run for the border right now.
Wow. Thank you.
Call it the Trump effect. An immigrant tells Fox News smugglers now using Donald Trump as a marketing tactic. Their pitch, get here before the wall goes up.
We have an election going on and the world follows this election.
The latest border surge poses many of the same concerns as it did in 2014. Agents diverted from their official duties, raising serious national safety concerns.
We don't know where these folks are headed. They tell us they're headed to a certain address, but there's really no way for us to verify that.
At the height of the crisis 2 years ago, the total of family units taken into custody stood at more than 66,000. As of last month, it was already well past that, at more than 68,000. It has volunteers working double time at the Sacred Heart Catholic Church in the border community of McAllen, Texas.
We provide them with an opportunity to clean themselves up, take a shower, get clean clothing, get hygiene items.
Officials say they're helping anywhere from 1 to 200 immigrants each day. Many come to get on their feet once ICE releases them and they're allowed to settle in America until their future immigration court hearing.
They need our help, and so we need to be able to not turn our backs on them.
The feds say this has nothing to do with a lack of compassion, but argue opening our doors to everyone is a slippery slope.
We have to give them the big boy rules and hope they're telling us the truth.
Nearly 2/3 of all apprehensions happen right here in Texas, largely because of how porous and rugged the terrain is. Brett?
Casey Stiegel in Texas. Casey, thanks. A down start to the week on Wall Street. The Dow dropped 55 today. The S&P 500 was off 7. The Nasdaq lost 11. The Commonwealth hosting tomorrow's debate has undergone something of a political evolution in recent years. What was once considered consistently red Virginia first turned purple, but may have started to become more blue in recent years. Correspondent Peter Ducey tells us where the Commonwealth is right now.
Democratic presidential candidates have been able to count on Charlottesville for the last 3 cycles, never winning less than 71% support. But this time, many residents are hesitant about Hillary Clinton.
I haven't really picked a candidate yet just because they're both kind of really out there.
For me, both candidates kind of have things that I don't like about them, so it's more of like a combination, which is why I'm kind of having a hard time deciding what I'm going to do about this year.
I'm voting for Hillary, and I'm a Democrat. I don't agree with what happened with her emails, but I'd rather vote for her than vote for Donald Trump.
It's a different story 2 hours east in Williamsburg.
To have the first woman president ever is the best issue.
Whether I actually believe in a lot of the things that she's for, at this point it's insignificant to me.
So for Democrats in Williamsburg, it's about personality. But for Republican-leaning voters there, it's about policy.
I would like to restrict immigration until we can properly vet people who are coming into the country.
The economy is really soft. We need to do something about it.
Then there's the Old Dominion's biggest city, Virginia Beach, where there's a big military community and where residents are looking for change and stability.
This is a big military area here too, as well. And I think a lot of people are concerned about the protection of our country, you know, with all the bombings and everything going on. It's a big issues.
My health insurance quadrupled because I have 4 kids. So, I mean, I can go into how I feel about that, but I know many people feel the same way. That just didn't work out like was, you know, as was talked about before somebody was elected.
Politics has been serious business here in Virginia since before there was a United States. There's living history everywhere that you turn, and many voters tell us they're taking time to make up their minds before helping to write the next chapter. In Williamsburg, Virginia, Peter Ducey, Fox News.
Tomorrow's vice presidential debate here will feature 2 contestants with an awful lot in common. Both are middle-aged white fathers of 3 with law degrees. Both spent time in Congress and as governors. They have conveniently flexible positions on trade and a willingness to talk about their faith. Chief Legal Correspondent Shannon Bream looks at how social issues may play a part in tomorrow's event.
Two men who grew up Catholic, served as governors, and now find themselves battling to be the next vice president. But their ideology on key social issues couldn't be more different. When it comes to abortion, GOP vice presidential nominee Governor Mike Pence is unequivocal.
I'm pro-life. I don't apologize for it. And I truly do believe that Roe versus Wade was wrongly decided. And again, overturned more than a century of pro-life laws that had been enacted through the Democratic process in all 50 states.
The Democrats' VP pick, Senator Tim Kaine, says he's personally pro-life, but supports upholding Roe v. Wade.
I've taken the position, which is quite common among Catholics, a personal feeling about abortion, but the right rule for government is to let women make their own decision.
The two candidates don't agree on the issue of same-sex marriage either.
I'll always believe that marriage is between one man and one woman, but my conviction on this matter is that that's an issue that ought to be left up to the states.
My full, complete, unconditional support for marriage equality is at odds with the current doctrine of the church that I still attend. But I think that's going to change too.
The bishop leading Kaine's home diocese responded, quote, "Despite recent statements from the campaign trail, the Catholic Church's 2,000-year-old teaching to the truth about what constitutes marriage remains unchanged and resolute."
There's a very striking contrast between these two vice presidential candidates, one who is now evangelical, but I would argue actually is much more consistent with Catholic teaching than Tim Kaine.
The Pence-Kaine comparisons come just days after Pope Francis spoke out against schools teaching transgenderism, though he says the church should welcome all people with compassion and mercy. When asked about the upcoming election here in America, he said he would address only a fictional situation.
Study the proposals well, pray, and choose in conscience.
Kaine has said he supports the Hyde Amendment, which blocks taxpayer money from being used to fund abortion. Hillary Clinton has vowed to repeal it. As vice president, he would be the tie-breaking vote in the Senate should it come to that. Kaine has said he will support Clinton's decision as president, regardless of his personal views. Brett.
Shannon Bream in Washington. Shannon, thank you. Fox News correspondent Jennifer Griffin and chief political correspondent Carl Cameron have been traveling with the candidates for months now. Let's get their perspectives on where we are and what we can expect from Tuesday's debate. Months. I mean, you guys have been nonstop. Jennifer, what about the Clinton campaign? What do they expect out of Tim Kaine, and what are they hoping for tomorrow night?
Well, I just spoke to an aide, and Kaine has spent 4 full days of mock debate prep down in Raleigh, North Carolina. He's taking a page out of Hillary Clinton's book, and as one aide put it to me, he is a policy wonk, and he has binders full of policies that he is studying. But he also realizes this is about the top of the ticket, and he's going to try to force Mike Pence to take a position on things that Donald Trump has said about his taxes and about things he said about women.
And Carl, Governor Pence has been pretty good about that. I mean, even in the toughest things to explain, he's done cleanup on aisle 4 pretty well for the Donald Trump campaign.
And they expect that there'll be a good bit of that tomorrow. Part of the challenge for Pence really has a great deal to do with how things went after the first debate for Donald Trump. The reaction hasn't been all that positive. Part of Pence's mission, whether he likes it or not, is to try to reverse that, change the momentum, get back on offense as opposed to having the top of the ticket on defense. And he has had some policy differences. For the first couple of months of his candidacy, he would not say that Mexico is going to pay for the wall that ticket would build. He has begun to say those things. And for him, the art of the turn will be getting off of defense and defending Donald Trump and going back to the attacks on Hillary Clinton and her policies.
The basic message he's going to hit is change. We are the change agent.
And following Donald Trump's lead over the last couple of weeks, he will identify the problems the country faces and then lay them squarely at the feet of Hillary Clinton and Democratic policies and challenge her to explain why things are so lousy and why she hasn't been able to do anything. And that has been working. It's just that it was eclipsed by the last debate performance. And one of the questions is, can Donald Trump keep off the Twitters during tomorrow night's debate?
I think that's something that, in fact, the Clinton campaign is worried about, that they will be watching Donald Trump to see if he tries to eclipse his own vice president.
Yeah, and the over-under whether Senator Kaine speaks Spanish?
Well, you have not heard him speaking Spanish that much because they haven't been getting the response from the Hispanic community that they had hoped for when he was chosen as vice president.
And how many make America great again?
And secure and safe.
Okay. Guys, as always, thank you. You guys are great on the trail. Trump talks taxes. Clinton does too, while trying not to talk about Bernie Sanders supporters. We'll talk about all of that with our all-star panel. Before we go to break, a little history about the area surrounding Tuesday's vice presidential debate. It was the site of some of the final days of the Civil War. One of those spots is now known as High Bridge Trail State Park, where in 1865, Confederate troops were unable to stop General Ulysses S. Grant's Union forces from crossing and pursuing them into Farmville, where we are. Soon after, General Robert E. Lee surrendered his army to Grant. Today, the picturesque High Bridge is part of a 31-mile rails to trails path where visitors can walk, run, or ride a bike. Some of the stunning views of this area. Special report continues in just a moment.
Hillary Clinton's only experience in cybersecurity involves her criminal scheme to violate federal law, engineering a massive cover-up and putting the entire nation in harm's way.
He talks us down. He makes disparaging comments about our country. He calls our military a disaster. Well, it's not. But it might have been if everybody else had failed to pay taxes to support our brave men and women in uniform.
Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton on the stump today as we have some new polls. First of all, the Fox average of recent polls. This is a national average. It's a race that includes the Libertarian Party and the Green Party as well. And you can see here that Hillary Clinton has plus 2.2 up in the average of these recent polls. Here in Virginia, a new poll out has Clinton up 42% to Trump's 35%. That is from Christopher Newport University. And then Quinnipiac came out with 4 state polls: Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And you can take a look at how this breaks down. Ohio, the big driver for Donald Trump, but you see Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, very close, within the margin of error in those polls, the state polls from Quinnipiac. Let's bring in our panel out here on site. Syndicated columnist George Will, Heidi Prisbala, senior political reporter for USA Today, and Charles Hurt, political columnist for The Washington Times. Okay, George, today on the trail, a lot of talk about taxes. Hillary Clinton really hitting Donald Trump. Donald Trump saying she hasn't created a job.
She hasn't created a job, and he has done what I think most Americans want to do, which is minimize their tax obligation. And all of this controversy, what no one has said is that anything he's done is illegal. It's an old saying that what's really shocking in America isn't what's done in and by Washington that's illegal, but that what's done in and by Washington that's legal. And if there's any system in the world that is rigged, to use Mr. Trump's favorite word, it's the American tax code, which is constructed by the well-lawyered, the well-represented, the well-lobbied for. It just happens that he happened to benefit from this. But again, I'm not sure American people are going to say, gosh, he shouldn't have used the loopholes that the people's representatives wrote.
Yeah, I mean, the tax lawyers will say it's not even a loophole. It's written in there, and carry forward is used by all kinds of people, including companies like GE and the New York Times and others. But she is hitting hard, Heidi, on the loss. The 1995 loss of $1 billion, and saying, here's my question, what kind of genius loses $1 billion in a single year? Does that play?
Well, this is where I think things get complicated for Trump, because this isn't just one story that's going to live and die in this 24-hour news cycle. The New York Times has here identified a massive loss. We don't know whether it was accumulated over several years and then reported in 1995, where this is coming from, but it raises a lot of questions, and it cuts right to the question of Trump's record as a successful businessman. It could very well be that in other years he had gains which offset that. But this is going to start the drumbeat then for him to release those returns, prove that they were profitable, and prove that, in fact, he is a successful businessman, which is really the whole reason d'etre for his his campaign and his sales pitch to a lot of these struggling middle-class voters. He's told them, I can go in and do for you and do for the country what I did for my businesses.
Charlie, who is this affecting? Who is this changing? Is anybody's vote changing based on this tax story?
I don't think so at all, because, as George says, people don't identify with people that want to pay more taxes if they just had, if they just ignored certain loopholes. And I think Heidi's right. But the problem is that, Donald Trump, I think the reason that he has seen some trouble in the last couple of days has more to do with the incredible media coverage after the first debate, panning him, saying that he got, and he didn't have his best performance, but she did, and her performance she was basically herself, which is not a very appealing thing either. And he missed a lot of opportunities, but I don't, to hit her on certain things, but I don't think it was nearly as bad as the media has sort of portrayed it. But I think that the buildup, of media coverage about that debate is the bigger reason why we're seeing some movement in a lot of these polls.
I do want to clear up one thing. Here's Donald Trump today talking about mental health issues and the military, specifically PTSD.
When you talk about the mental health problems, when people come back from war and combat and they see things that maybe a lot of the folks in this room have seen many times over, and you're strong and you can handle it, but a lot of people can't handle it. And they see horror stories, they see events that you couldn't see in a movie, nobody would believe it. Now, we need a mental health help and medical, and it's one of the things that I think is least addressed.
Now, a lot of people jumped on that. A lot of people said he was making fun of PTSD or something. Chad Robichaux, who was the veteran who asked Trump the question about PTSD, put out a statement saying, I think it's sickening that anyone would twist Mr. Trump's comments to me in order to pursue a political agenda. I took his comments to be thoughtful and understanding of the struggles many veterans have, and I believe he's committed to helping them. George, it seems like every story has sort of a little bit of an anti-Trump feel to it in the past few days.
It really does. Now, Mr. Trump, in a way, gives people running room to do this because he's sometimes syntactically challenged as he wanders through some of his sentences, but it really is perverse to say that he in some way was insulting these people, just as, I must say, it's perverse to say that Hillary Clinton was disparaging young people when she said some of Bernie Sanders' people are living in their parents' basements. She was saying, I think, in any fair construction, that the economy that we inherited from the Great Recession caused that to happen.
Quickly, we could see this other shoe drop with WikiLeaks, some email, and that story continues. We learned that the immunity deal included destroying Cheryl Mills' computer. That doesn't help the Clinton folks.
No, and that is, I feel like both gentlemen are correct in terms of the media pylon, and it goes both ways. A few weeks ago, we were all riding herd on the Clinton Foundation story, and all it takes is one major blockbuster headline like that for the flow to then go in reverse and for Hillary Clinton to be kind of back on her heels again. We don't know what is in this WikiLeaks bombshell that is being promised tomorrow. I'm sure we're all waiting with bated breath, but I just don't think we can make that prediction based on what we've seen so far. I kind of feel like the Russians, if they are behind this, would have tried to get the worst stuff out there a week or two ago, but we just have to wait and see what it is.
Well, it could be a jump ball to deal with on the debate tomorrow, but last word on this.
Yeah, no, I've been amazed in the last couple of weeks the degree to which this email scandal, given the fact that everybody already knew basically a lot of the larger contours of the story, how much it has actually hurt her. And I think it's contributed a lot to that, and the fact that Donald Trump had a good run there of making fewer mistakes than usual. So I've been sort of surprised. So no telling what could happen. If there is something blockbuster, I think we'll see it reflected down the road.
And the honest and trustworthy numbers obviously are interesting. Next up, a vice presidential debate between two candidates with a lot in common. Stay here.
And the truth of the matter is, specifically to Hillary Clinton, it's important that we talk about the record. And I'm looking forward to that debate on Tuesday night. Because this election is about it is about a choice, and people need to think really hard about the record that Hillary Clinton brings on the foreign stage.
So it's good. I mean, just gotta be myself. But I'll look forward to seeing you down there on Tuesday. It's intense, but I'm calm. Things work out the way they're supposed to. I'm calm. So anyway, see you down there.
Well, it's their big time in the spotlight. Senator Tim Kaine on the Democratic side and Indiana Governor Mike Pence on the Republican side. We did a poll about favorability in our recent poll, and you can see the favorability for Pence and Kaine, 40-38%. Unfavorables there, but interestingly enough, never heard of, 16% and 15%. So they are trying to adjust those final numbers with this debate tomorrow night. We are back with the panel. George, the challenges for each man.
Well, first of all, don't make news. Most people who run for president would love to run alone because they could control this. So the threshold question here is plausible president or not. They're both vastly experienced as executives and legislators, so they'll pass that. Beyond that, on this college campus, this is the equivalent of a pass-fail course. Do you pass that test or not? Beyond that, they want to reinforce problems that their candidates have. Mike Pence is thoroughly vanilla and proud of it, and he's running with this Roman candle of a man at the top of the ticket. When Mr. Kaine was first being vetted for this, he said, "Oh, they won't pick me, I'm so boring." And of course, with Hillary Clinton said, "Yes, that's my guy."
That's what I want.
Exactly, because someone who will not make news. So by being self-deprecating, he was advertising himself skillfully.
Heidi, how much of this debate do you think will be really substantive? Because both these guys like to get into the weeds. They're kind of wonky. And how much is about defending the nominees on the top of their ticket and the actions or the words or the things that they've done?
Well, both. I think they have to fulfill the traditional role that the vice presidential candidate plays, which is attack, 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 especially when you have two such wildly unpopular candidates at the top of the ticket. So I think that you'll see a lot of that. But at the same time, I'm personally, for anybody who's excited about policy or who wants to actually see what the clear policy distinctions are between these two candidates, this might be your opportunity. So tune in. We're hoping because both of these men are very experienced policy makers who have been practicing for this debate and are ready to draw those distinctions on policy.
Elaine Quijano with CBS is the moderator for this debate. I've worked with her. She's a very competent correspondent, and I would expect she's been studying up for this moment. A wonderful lady. Charlie, your expectations for tomorrow night?
I suspect that she's going to try to make it about policy, and I think that the two candidates are going to be thrilled to keep it about policy. And I'm willing to make a prediction here. I do think that this debate tomorrow will be not as exciting as the presidential, as the top ticket of the ticket. But that said, it is an exciting time for people that are history buffs. It's an exciting time for Virginia. You've got the first vice presidential candidate from Virginia in decades. You've got a debate here in Virginia. So that's all very exciting and will be interesting to watch.
Yeah, and we should point out that, when you look at vice presidential debates, you don't really think of many things. I mean, can you remember anything specifically last time, other than the SNL thing where Paul Ryan had to drink a lot of water and Vice President Biden was laughing and smiling a lot? But there are a couple that you remember from vice presidential debates. Take a listen.
I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
Hey, can I call you Joe? Okay, good. Thanks.
You can call me Joe, George. They're looking for that moment, aren't they?
They are, but I have never met an American who said I voted for presidential candidate A because of running mate B. The four of us are definitionally weird because we're
into this.
I understand that, and most Americans aren't.
I know.
Tomorrow night is a debate and playoff baseball. Which are you betting on?
Oh, that's true.
Lloyd Benson landed a good one, but last I remember, he lost.
That's true.
His ticket lost.
That's exactly right. Well, thank you, panel. Up next, it's time to check the Twitter feed. Stay here. It's Monday. Time to check my Twitter feed. Mean Tweets Monday. I hear it's Mean Girls Monday, October 3rd. I don't know. Anyway, take a look at this. Spark Brett Baer is just so annoying, if that's even how you spell his stupid name. Spark, you got it right on the first try. Helga Bauman, I hate watching you, so we will divorce. Helga, thanks for watching while you have. Justin, Brett Baer is not a real human being. Dude looks like an action figure. Justin, G.I. Joe had a very good run, Justin. Frank Brander says, I am a Trump hater. He insists I am. Special report is unwatchable. What's the differentiation, there you go, from the MSLSD? You're losing viewership. Wise up. Sorry, a lot of letters there. From Call Me Deplorable at Spot.